Hey everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. The channel is, dedicated to promoting a book that I wrote as an ebook. It's called Follow. You can find it on Amazon.com under the Kindles tab, if you will. It's $3.99. Or I'm trying to actually reduce the price to it. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm still trying to maneuver through the site. I think they've changed some things on the site, but it's a book that pretty much presents spirituality in a very holistic way. It's not just typically when people, teach about spirituality or they talk about spirituality or even if they observe some type of spiritual practice, it's usually a very feminine practice. It's usually very psychological. It's about creativity and intuition and all those metaphysical aspects of a human being. But in this book, I really try to bridge the gap between the metaphysical, so-called spiritual aspect of us and the earthly. And so the earthly deals with the reptilian brain. And so typically when we descend into the matrix, we are not able to embrace the earthly reptilian aspect of ourselves. Within incarnation, we're really placed here to be very unholy. And so the various constructs of the matrix, such as media, entertainment, education, you know, uh, religion, the government structure itself, the familial structure, all those structures that are embedded by the matrix environment or reality, I should say, they work to separate what we call Adam and Eve, or the conscious ego and the unconscious mind or unconscious astral body, or God and the devil, whatever you want to call it, Isis, Ra, Adam, Eve, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different concepts to to basically conceptualize the two yous, if you will, that is created within the matrix environment. And so my book talks about that. It talks about the elite that actually run this prison system for the soul. And it talks about, just the microcosm of my life and how that, how it swings between the microcosm of my life and how that factors into, I guess what you would say, reality in and of itself, like the world reality, if you will, that's projected as the seeming world. And so, many people call the projection of the world to be Maya or dream in certain religions. I think in Buddhist religions it's called dream or Maya. But really, what it really suggests is that the universe itself is an illusion. It's not real. That's why there are laws of the universe. But when you go beyond I guess what you would say, the wheel of the zodiac or the wheel of rebirth, you get beyond duality. And this is where you find the Christ. And so the Christ is above what's right or wrong. And so that's why in the book of Revelation it talks about, let he who be righteous be righteous, let he who be filthy be filthy, but let he who is holy be holy. And so you become holy when you escape duality and you realize that within your incarnation you're bound by the Akashic record or the book of life. And so that's a book of all the thoughts, actions, and emotions that you will have as a soul within your incarnation. And so at the atomic level, everything is set. It's when you start to wake up, you start to realize that, and you start to see and understand not the what, which is the lower taxonomy of knowledge, but the why and the how things have come to be at the atomic level within physical manifestation. And so, I know that's a whole lot, if you will, but I really wanted just to kind of give you a little snippet about what the book is about before I get into the meat, if you will, of this video. And so in this video, I want to talk about the occult meaning of the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis. Genesis is, the Bible in of itself is, it's not real. It's a whole bunch of stories that are compiled to, I would say, for slaves, if you're reading it as a slave, to invoke fear. And so to actually increase your psychological mind. And the New Age is like that too. The New Age is all about the psychological, the so-called spiritual, the really super duper feminine aspect of your soul. But it doesn't really talk very much about the masculine. And so the Bible, although it's old, the Bible really works to push the spiritual, psychological, feminine aspect of the soul, really to make you psycho, really. because in the Bible it perpetuates a lot of fear, and fear actually works on your psyche. It takes away from your feeling body, and it works on your psyche. So, looking at the occult meaning of the book of Genesis, I'm going to go through the first 5 books. And so the first book is Genesis. And so, when you see the word Genesis, you should look at the etymology of the word and know that Genesis relates to genetics. It relates to the genitals, but where I should say the solar plexus is located. And so when you see solar, you see sun. And so it's very important to look at these various things. When your pineal gland or your third eye opens, you really start to see the occult meaning, the underlying meanings of certain things and why they were placed there by the Freemasons, if you will, in the Bible. So as a slave, you think that, Adam and Eve are real people and they were in some type of garden. And so literal, when you're a monkey-minded reptilian, where you're just functioning from your 5 senses, where you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear, you really, I guess, just read the Bible very superficially. You read it literally. But these things are not made to be taken literally by the masters. The masters actually know the real meaning behind them. And so it takes the open pineal gland or third eye, if you will, to interpret what these symbols within the Bible really represent. And so that's what I want to go through here in Genesis. So, like I said, Genesis is about the genitals, about genetics. It is about, I guess what you would say, the solar plexus, because like I said, the solar plexus is where your genitals are housed. And so, so this deals with the really, in many ways, the earthly aspect of you that is rotted out when you descend into the matrix. And so they call this the Kundalini. I don't like to call it and refer to it as that because it has racial implications, because your solar plexus deals a lot with melanin. And so, black people have the most melanin, if you will, out of all demographics. And so when they say Kundalini, the Freemason, creators that created this matrix, they're referring to black people as coons, and everyone on this planet has been black at some point. That's why it says everyone has like black ancestors. So, each time you're reincarnated, your melanin gets extracted out of you. And so many people may say, oh, that's crazy, that doesn't make any sense. But, just think about it. Look at the hues of black people as opposed to Asians and Caucasians. If you look at the spectrum of hues of black people, you'll see a wide spectrum of hues. But when you get into your Asian, your Caucasian races, the spectrum of hues pretty much stays within the same spectrum. There's not a whole lot of deviation. And so when you look at the black race, which are your original Jews, they're not Jewish, but they're Jews. You will see there's a theft of melanin. So we call this melanin theft. When it comes to a Jew. And so the more you get your melanin taken out, the more you are Jewish. So I wanted to make that known here, and just kind of let you know about the about the reincarnation system, and eventually you become a master race where you don't have any functioning pineal gland, but you just pretty much live by the false reality of the matrix, and you become a dumb blonde. Really, you're smart in terms of the information disseminated to you by the matrix, but as far as having your God capabilities, those are totally deactivated, and so you can't really get beyond the collective unconscious mind once you get to an Aryan race, or I would say a master race of no melanin or functioning of your third eye, your pineal gland. So let's get into Genesis, okay? In the book of Genesis, we have certain figures. We have Adam and Eve, and we have the Creator God, and we have the snake, right? Are those all the ones? Yeah. And then we have angels, right? So there's 6 figures, if you will. And then we have, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge. And so I just want to kind of put those various things out there and explain what those things are. So Adam and Eve actually are not people per se. In a way they are, but in a way they aren't. Adam and Eve represent the mind. They represent the masculine left and the feminine right brain. And so Adam would be your reptilian brain, and Eve would be your ego, which is your feminine brain, if you will, or God aspect of yourself. And not L, sorry. Let's see, the creator God would be Satan. Yeah. So the creator God would be Satan. I know many people really attribute the, virtue to the creator God, if you will. But if you're looking at it from an occult standpoint, the creator God is very evil and menacing. So I just want to put that out there. And so the Garden of Eden represents L. So you could say that Adam and Eve represent Isis and Ra, and the Garden of Eden represents L, because the thing is that Eden is a place of paradise, right, and abundance. And so you think of America, you think of the government itself. Our consciousness, our left brain, our right brain, at Adam and Eve, are placed within an environment of abundance and paradise. And so you could think of America. That's why America is called the American dream. It's not made for you to be grounded for you. That's why it's called a dream, or Maya. So it's a place where your consciousness is placed to accrue phantoms of desire that are not grounded into physical reality. So this is what we call Adam and Eve, Isis and Ra, or whatever you want to call it, the conscious, the unconscious mind, placed in an environment of abundance, which we call Eden, which is representative to Israel, Isis, Eve, and Ra, which is Adam, surrounded or separated, if you will, by El, which is Satan. The allegorical El is the ancient Hebrew name for the Greek god Saturn. So just kind of give you some context about the characterization here. And the creator god is Satan. And the reason why I labeled the creator god Satan in the book of Genesis is because he is really trying to keep knowledge away from Adam and Eve. He is playing God. And so the thing is that the difference between, I guess you would say slaves, or Jews, if you will, Jews, and the people that actually run the matrix system is knowledge. They have more knowledge than humanity, but they're just people. Okay, so, but they just have more knowledge than we do. And because they have more knowledge, they have power. Knowledge is power. So what does that mean? Like, for example, if I'm poor, right, and then I see some people who are rich, but I have more knowledge and I know more than they do, then I have their wealth, and I don't, so basically I am wealthy, but the wealth did not originate with me. It originated with the Jew, or the real Jew, I should say. It originated with the person that had the wealth, but they did not have the knowledge to access their wealth. And so as a result, because I have more knowledge, I'm able to steal their wealth for myself. And so, pretty much that's what the creator God is. He's about being, making sure that Adam and Eve are, really obedient to him. He has more knowledge than they do. And so that's why he tries to keep them away from the tree of knowledge. And it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so many people don't really realize this, but why is it called, why is there a tree of good and evil? People really don't like to point this out, but evil already exists within the Garden of Eden before they find knowledge of it. Okay, there wouldn't be knowledge of evil if evil didn't already exist within the garden with Adam and Eve. So why would the creator God not want Adam and Eve to know about evil? Why would he not want them to know about that? And so because we know that evil exists in the garden with Adam and Eve, it goes to show that it breaks that whole, notion when people say that Adam and Eve had the run of the place and they had paradise. They did not have paradise. They just were kept separate, if you will. Whenever the separation happened between Adam and Eve, the being, Adam, who was the original being, right, who had the feminine principle of Eve within him, or you could say he was androgynous, he became separated. And so when he became separate, he became a slave. And so that means that he had an astral body, and then he had his ego. And so, which is Eve. Eve is the ego, is God, basically, of the being, the virtuous aspect and feeling aspect of the being. And so the thing is that, you know, with the separation, Adam and Eve were supposed to be ignorant, and God was supposed to be the functioning authority figure within the garden, within America, right? Within the environment of abundance, if you will. So the thing is that when you're waking up in the matrix and you really realize the various illusions of the environment of the dream, of the American dream, you become a threat. And so that's why Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. So when you realize, you know, all the demiurge gods are false, like, you know, Jesus, you know, his name wouldn't have been Jesus during the time that he would have walked the earth because the letter J didn't come out, or, you know, when you find out about, I guess what you would say, just certain things of the demiurge that are just not true. You find out about brainwave frequencies and how the mind does not belong to you, because there's so many things fused within our consciousness that as an ego within a beta brainwave frequency, we can't really readily recall. And so that means that there are people who run this hellhole for the Jews. That's why we say hello, because this is hell. When we find out information like that, and we find out that they place a lot of things in our consciousness that we can't recall within a beta brainwave frequency of the ego, because the ego doesn't catch everything. And then when we wake up and we find out that there's a lot of things in our consciousness that we can't recall unless we're in a theta brainwave frequency, in a slower meditative state, then you gain knowledge, you begin to be banished from the garden. And so you really experience what we call excommunication, if you will, from the matrix. And so that's the reason why Adam and Eve are actually banished from the garden, because you're supposed to be a slave in the garden. You're supposed to be a slave. Adam and Eve, with the separation, it accrues phantoms within the psychological mind. And so when you accrue phantoms within your psychological mind, it's a wishful mind. And so that's why within the garden, people can't ground their desires into physical reality, or there's only a very small portion that we can ground into physical reality within the Garden of Eden, or the American dream. So, like, say for example, you're watching television and you see these exotic places to go on vacation. And so you say to yourself, man, I really want to go there, but you really don't have the resources or maybe the time to make the money to go there. So you can't really manifest it. So you wish that you could go there. And so when you're wishing, and we're taught to do this since birth, actually, because the handler, which is your parent, your initial authority or earthly master is your parent. They teach you no, and they teach you what you can't have. And so that stuff gets stored into your unconscious mind. And so when the consciousness can't have what it wants in the physical, it will divert that into the unconscious. And in the unconscious, you have access to that on the astral realm when you go to sleep at night and you shed your concepts of the matrix. So you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not rich or poor, black or white. You're not really under a restriction of laws and under the authority. And so you can work out your restrictions that you had in physicality and experience the things that you wanted to experience as an ego. And I'll get back to that in a minute, because that correlates a lot with, there's a song in pop culture, it's called Wake Me Up. And so if you look at that video, it really sheds light on the difference between the hell realm, which is what we're in, and the astral realm, where you work out your restrictions, which is which is another reality, so to speak, I should say. So it's important to know, Isis and Ra, the right and left brain, are the ego and the astral body, or the unconscious mind. L is the environment of abundance, what we consider to be a dream, because we can't ground our desires into physical reality, like in the American dream, because of Satan or Saturn, the time and the material. We don't have access to our sacral solar plexus, or the sun, as they call it, to manifest. That's rotted out. And then we have Satan, which is the creator God, preventing knowledge, so we don't find out the information that could actually help us to ground our desires into reality. And so, like I said, knowledge is power. And so that's why it's so frightening when Eve actually accesses knowledge through the snake. And so really you could think of the snake as the spine, because when you look at the anatomy of a human being, and you think about the fornix, and they talk about no fornication, if you will, in Christianity. Fornix or fornication is the feeling body. And so what they want to do in this reality is banish the feeling body. They do not want you to have access to it. So the Creator God in the garden, right, the gods of our world, or the lords of karma, whatever you want to call them, they are mad with Eve because Eve realizes her divinity. And so not only is she, spiritual, right, psychological within the garden, but she also, starts to experience her earthly aspect. And so this is something that they do not want. This is something because this is holiness. And so this is supposed to be a very unholy construct. This is not intended for you to come here and to realize your dreams. This is about you to think about your dreams. So, you keep reincarnating between, coming here to hell, right? And going to the astral realm, or the moon, the unconscious aspect of your heaven. So keep coming back and forth. But they don't want you to ground your desires, because if you ground your desires into physicality, then you'll be light enough to ascend. But when you don't ground your desires and you give up the mind and body, you'll be attracted to what you did not get. So all the money you didn't get, all the sex, all of the various things that were fused into your consciousness that you did not get, you will be attracted to that, and you will just naturally want to fulfill that aspect of yourself, that earthly aspect of yourself, within another incarnation. That's just how it is. Most people will not escape the wheel of rebirth, and well, no one will escape the wheel of rebirth unless you ground your physical, your earthly aspect into the ego, into the virtuous ego. So I wanted to talk about that. And so when Eve actually accesses her when Eve accesses her feeling body, which is the snake, and the snake symbolizes the a part of the tree of life, right? The branches of the tree is the brain, okay? And so the brain is Adam and Eve, right? But the spine is the snake, and so the snake actually is holiness, because the snake is the feeling aspect of the body. So, and I think this kind of goes into Lilith as well, because, the original wife in the Hebrew text of Adam is Lilith. And so Lilith is like a horny devil, right? So it goes to show that, Lilith is, she becomes a demon or what have you, because she realizes what God is basically keeping from her. Which is the feeling aspect of herself. So once she realizes this divinity, believe it or not, Lilith or Eve, or whatever you want to call it, I think Eve and Lilith are very synonymous when it comes to these mythological stories about the creation or the book of Genesis. But Eve becomes a Jew. Eve becomes a Jew. And so when you think about the Jews, and I don't want you to think about a Jew in terms of what, you see on television about Israel or what have you. Like I said, a Jew has high melanin content. But really, I don't really want you to think about it more so in a physical, atomic level, but think of it in a metaphysical aspect. A Jew has two intersecting triangles. One represents the masculine and one represents the feminine. And so when Eve actually consorted with the snake, her spiritual was consorting with her earthly. The snake represents the earthly, represents the fornix going down the spine, represents the feeling body, the grounding of desire, not just thinking psychologically, spiritually about what you want, but actually getting what you want and really realizing your desires. And so she becomes a Jew. She becomes an intersecting triangle. And so really the whole Bible is about destroying the Jews. Really destroying and separating the mind And I talk about that in the first 5 books of the Bible, and how it's a metaphysical weapon to get rid of Eve, to get rid of the Jew, to get rid of the being that is not just spiritual but also is earthly as well. And so this represents holiness, and so that's why, you know, basically, Eve is seen as a threat, and so, Adam, gets banished, if you will. Adam and Eve get banished from the garden because they actually have knowledge, and so God can't be God here if you have as much knowledge as He does. And so, the God of this world is King James of Scotland. He's the elite that actually owns the pineal gland that projects Maya, or the illusion of the universe, or whatever you want to call it. And so, he is Satan. He is the creator God, I should say, in the garden, that actually controls the slave, or slaves, I should say. In a way, it controls the slaves of the Garden of Eden. And so that, basically is you and I. But there's only one Christ. There's only one Christ, and there's only one Eve, if you will, that really, is used to project the seeming world. So you can think of all the souls in the world as reptilian, just reptilian brain, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. So everyone in the matrix except for Eve is bound by, it represents, if you will, represents a being that is bound by the 5 senses. Like I said, you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. That's why the 5-pointed star is so integral to the Edenistic environment. Everywhere you look, you're going to find stars. You'll find it everywhere. In education, in the grocery store, you'll find stars. When you turn on the TV and you look at star ratings from movies and stuff like that, on government flags, everything is about the pentagram. Even the government of the American dream, right? America, the Pentagon. There's even like speculation that if you look at the layout of Washington, D.C., this is like a 5-pointed star or something like that. So everything here is satanic. This is hell. That's why I say hello again. So, I just wanted to point out the significance of, I guess what you would say, the Garden of Eden, and the various characters in it, and what they really represent from a metaphysical standpoint. I want to focus too on the angels, that actually guard the tree of life, because the tree of life is the mind, or the mind and the body, I should say. The indentions on the brain look like branches on a tree. So the branches would be the brain, and the trunk of the tree would be the feeling body, the fornix that actually, the fornicating aspect, I should say, of a human being. And so, when you look at, the tree of life, and how God places angels to prevent Adam and Eve from realizing their immortality, the angels that are used to guard the tree of life are the reptilian aspects of the one mind that's projecting the seeming world. And so that's all of you. So basically, when you wake up in the matrix, everyone that's bound by the matrix are angels. They are angels that are designed to keep you from the tree of life, or Eve, I should say. Keep Adam and Eve, from the tree of life. So what does that mean? Like I said, there's only one Christ within a generation. And so, everybody else is really bound by, the Akashic record. And so, although, many, false prophets of the demiurge, I call them, many of them say really great things. They have really great information, but a lot of the information is mixed with lies, because they are bound by the Akashic record. But Eve is not. Eve is a Jew. And so Eve has the pineal ability, or the third eye ability, to decipher what is true and what is not true. And so Eve has issues, because every time she tries to realize her divinity, she is bound by people who, try to, I guess what you would say, she's bound by people who try to push her back into the matrix. And so it's kind of like, okay, you know, if Eve was brought up to believe in Jesus, then, you know, her family structure or her, you know, her friends, people who were brought up Christian will say, no, that's not true, this, that, and the other, you know, you should believe in Christianity. But with the pineal capacity, she knows that's not true. Or like, say for example, you know, if people want to, you know, push Eve, the Christ, if you will, into, I guess what you would say, you know, just believing in things that are just not true in the matrix environment, like education. You know, education is not made for you to learn anything. It's just made to inundate your mind with a whole lot of useless information that covers up your divinity, because it's important. Memory is very important when it comes to ascension. And so when you can't remember something, then you just say, why can't I remember things? You know, you should be able to have the capacity to remember everything. The unconscious mind does. So why is a consciousness you don't remember everything? It's because you have too much information on your computer. And so we're bombarded with so much information that you don't remember pertinent things. Things are very important. You know, when it comes to the educational system, you know, the best way to learn something is in a slower brainwave frequency of delta or theta, when you're priming the mind for whatever you want. When you look at the Matrix, Neo doesn't learn Kung Fu by studying Kung Fu and going to Kung Fu practice and practicing. He learns it through sheer programming. And so you can learn anything by just programming your mind in a slower brainwave state. So going to school and taking tests and quizzes and studying and things like that, that's really just a snail-paced way of learning something. And so you get nowhere within the educational system ultimately. The elite don't have their kids go to school like you think. You know, that's for regular folk, if you will. But for them, you know, it's a stumbling block, if you will. They have faster ways of learning things through sheer programming and slower brainwave frequencies. And so Eve knows these things. But, you know, but when Eve talks against the educational system, or when she talks against media entertainment and how, you know, it's fused with Satanism and things like that, you know, people who like hip-hop music will say, oh, no, it's wonderful. But Eve will say, no, that's, you know, that's causing, you know, especially people who have more melanin, it causes them to focus on the divine instead of the divinity within them that creates the divine. And so, you know, when Eve talks against certain aspects of the matrix that people are bound by, those people become handlers, or what you call angels, that guard her divinity, because she sees the truth, but they are integral to upholding and concealing the truth and keeping her functioning at the spiritual level, as opposed to having her ground, with the consorting of the snake, ground her fornix, or I should say her feeling aspect of herself. Because, like I said, Eve is a Jew. So, you know, when it comes to, you know, the book of Genesis, and how, you know, the creator God is Satan, if you will, and the people who run this construct, how they are, you know, they're satanics, you know, if you will. Like I said, the one that runs this one is the King James of Scotland. It's very representative of that video, Wake Me Up. If you look at that video, Wake Me Up, I can't remember his name, Invinci or something like that. You see there's two worlds. And so in his video, he has two triangles that are not intersecting. So he's telling you there's a world that's beyond this one that's unholy. They have triangles that are separated. And so within the Edenistic construct, you know, they're not holy. They don't have any knowledge. And so they are playing either, you know, in the hell realm, their ego, or in the astral realm, their unconscious masculine self, where they get to party and stuff like that. And so, you know, the woman in the video, she's a Jew. You could say she's Eve. And so she has a little girl with her. And that little girl represents her id, or her inner child, because she stays within the hell realm. And she's not allowed to go to the other realm with the people who are having fun and stuff like that and doing all their debauchery, whatever the case is, because she has knowledge. And so, you know, you can't go to that other world with knowledge, because if you go to that other world with knowledge, if Eve is allowed to do that, then she taints the other world. Because the thing is that in order for this construct to really work, you have to have ignorance and unholiness here. So you can't have intersecting triangles. You can't be a Jew. You have to have a separation between your masculine and your feminine. because, you know, if you go to that world and you're like, you know, the jig is up, and you know that everything is a lie, and you know, you're dangerous because you're honest, really. And so, you know, when you see in the video at one point in the audience, somebody is doing something like this, and so if you study Freemasonry, you know, and they throw up devil horns and stuff like that, they're worshiping the devil, or the devil just represents the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind is full of masculine sexual energy, and so that's why a devil is associated with having horns. When people say they're horny, they need sexual release, because that's connected to the genitals, going back to Genesis, and you know, that actual area, if you will. And how that relates to the genitals, relates to the solar plexus. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit about the Wizard of Oz here, but I might do another segment, if you will, of the video. But, you know, just wanted to shed light on the occult meaning behind the book of Genesis, and the various figures in the book of Genesis, and, you know, how that relates to, you know, our particular reality, and, you know, having you to get some layman's terms understanding, you know, in addition to how a slave would read it and read the literal meaning of the book of Genesis, what it really means. So I will see you guys in what is it? Exodus? Exodus. All right. Thanks, guys.